words. We condemn this action. It is unacceptable. So the Somali government will try all it can to get information regarding this incident. We request the international community help stem the increasing piracy in Somalia.
Winds of 80 kilometers per hour have caused travel delays around the Washington, D.C. area. The gales fanned fires in surrounding counties, prompting the closure of several highways. As Barbara Benitez reports, the gusts also uprooted a very special tree.
4, 3, 2, 1.
It's a presidential tradition dating back to 1923, the annual lighting of the national Christmas tree in Washington, D.C. But the majestic blue spruce that has stood over the White House for the past 32 years is no more, a victim of strong winds gusting through the U.S. Capitol on Saturday morning. The previous 2 national Christmas trees have also been toppled by wind.
We knew that this tree wouldn't last, just as any tree on planet Earth doesn't last forever. So this really is a part of nature.
A replacement tree was found 2 years ago by the National Park Service, which takes care of the land near the White House and where the tree is supposed to stand.
This coming December, there will easily be a new Christmas tree in the ground for the next lighting of the National Christmas Tree in December.
By the end of the day, the tree was headed for the wood chipper, gone but not forgotten. Barbara Benitez, Al Jazeera, Washington.
This is Al Jazeera. Let's recap the headlines now. Security forces have opened fire on mourners, burying anti-government protesters in the Libyan city of Benghazi. Hospital officials say at least 200 people have been killed in the past 6 days. Bahrain's main trade union has called off a strike planned for Sunday, saying its demand for the right to protest peacefully has been heeded. It comes as demonstrators gathered again at the Pearl roundabout in Manama. They're calling for the government to immediately resign. Yemen's president is seeking a compromise with protesters there who are demanding he steps down. President Ali Abdullah Saleh is offering to oversee a dialogue between his ruling party and the opposition. Well, it comes as one of the leaders of South Yemen's independence movement is reportedly been arrested in Aden. Uganda's Electoral Commission has announced that President Yoweri Museveni has won a new 5-year term with 68% of the vote. His main rival, Kizza Besigye, took 26%. The opposition says the results were tainted with fraud. Museveni has already been in power for 25 years. 15 people have been killed in fighting in the Somali capital between African Union and Al-Shabaab forces. Clashes in Mogadishu broke out during the weekend, centering on the southern districts of Hodan and Holwadag. At least 21 other civilians were injured in attacks that included shells straying into calmer districts. Suez Canal officials are denying reports that 2 Iranian naval ships have sailed through the waterway. Well, this comes despite claims by Iranian state TV that they've already passed through on the way to Syria. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it's an attempt by Iran to broaden its regional influence. Well, Afghan medical officials say at least 40 people are now known to have died in Saturday's suicide bombing, making it one of the worst attacks in months. The Taliban says one of its bombers blew itself up in the Kabul bank in Jalalabad. 73 more people were wounded. Meanwhile, a governor in eastern Kunar province says recent attacks by US-led NATO forces have killed 64 people, including 20 women and 29 children. Well, Mexico's President Felipe Calderón says he's sending more troops to fight the drug cartels in the north. We'll update you. Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the Palestine Papers, the fallout for Mideast negotiators
أنا أتحمل المسؤولية الكاملة.
and the news organizations that broke the story. legal battles over corporate public relations between documentary makers and big money multinationals.
They attempted to keep it out of the theaters and away from the public.
Myanmar, warning signs for Aung San Suu Kyi in newspapers there. And voices of freedom in Tahrir Square in our web video of the week. For Palestinians and Israelis, it's been a long time since the Middle East peace process has given cause for optimism, let alone hope. For every roadmap, there's been a roadblock. For every set of negotiations, there's been a deal breaker. But over the years of coverage, people inside and outside the region felt they had a pretty good handle on what was going on, what was on the negotiating table. That all changed last month with the publication of the Palestine Papers by AlJazeera and the UK's Guardian newspaper. The trove of secret documents contained diplomatic correspondence between Israel, Palestine, and the United States from 1999 to 2010. The revelations made headlines, put AlJazeera in the crosshairs of the Palestinian Authority over the network's role in the story, and led to the eventual resignation of Saeb Erekat, the chief Palestinian negotiator. Our starting point this week is the story that changed the way the media report one of the biggest ongoing stories on the global news agenda, the Middle East peace process.
The papers are the largest leak in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
These papers put you in the room with Mahmoud Abbas, with Ariel Sharon, with Hillary Clinton, and that is absolutely unprecedented.
Behind every leak, there's always a story behind the story. Who leaked these documents and why?
More bombshells today relating to Palestinian documents leaked by AlJazeera.
These documents did not come from Washington or Tel Aviv. They came from somewhere in Ramallah.
The papers that brought the closed-door negotiations out into the open were obtained by AlJazeera, which then shared them with The Guardian. The two outlets say they looked at 690 internal emails, 275 sets of meeting minutes, 64 draft agreements, and 54 maps and charts. They published their findings simultaneously on January 23rd.
It was such a groundbreaking revelation of the four core issues of the conflict: Jerusalem,
to concede significant amounts of land in East Jerusalem,
refugees,
4.7 million Palestinians are registered as refugees,
security, borders,
pattern of deceit, powerlessness, and despair,
and much, much more. It was a dynamic that took you into the negotiations and showed you what the personalities behind this peace process were and how their public statements were at variance with their private negotiating behavior.
To put it another way, Palestinian negotiators led by Saeb Erekat offered or appeared to offer much more than Palestinians ever knew about. And even that was not enough to get a deal with the Israelis.
There was nothing salacious in what was going on. This is perfectly normal in diplomacy. And it's the same way it's the job of journalists to dig this out, it's the job of governments to try to keep it secret.
But it did not play well on the Arab street.
يا سيدي هناك تحقيق فلسطيني داخلي الآن حول ما